Obviously, games continue to progress and graphics continue to get better, but sometimes stuff comes out that still blows us away. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on GameRanks, 10 brand new games with insane graphics. Starting off with number 10, it's Black Myth Wukong. So, it was hard not to be skeptical about Black Myth Wukong. Not necessarily about the game, but the graphics. The trailers just looked almost too good to be true. But now with the final game out and in everybody's hands, even the most skeptical have to admit that this game is the real deal. It is a remarkable accomplishment, and some of the most detailed and carefully crafted visuals I've ever seen in a game. If this was an actual counting down to the best kind of list, which it's not like we never do, but this is not one, this would be number one, hands down. It's a powerhouse of a game full of stunning vistas and tiny little impressive details. Like, look at the leaves. They're nuts. Look at the water physics, the lighting. They all use Unreal Engine 5's Lumen technology, and they are all stunning. It makes some of these environments look almost photorealistic at times, if you ignore the monkey man. The world design is not the most impressive thing either. The enemies, the armor sets, every little item in your inventory, it's all meticulously detailed. And every single item you pick up is an actual 3D object. I didn't realize this. I thought some of it was just artwork, but look, all fully modeled, all 3D.
Corner. Seems like he just fell from a fruit tree here.
Perfect timing. This peach knew I needed us.
You could talk about the graphics in Black Myth Wukong probably forever. It's all extremely impressive. The only downside is the relentless attention to detail means on occasion they place realism over good level design. Certain environments are way too big without a whole lot in them, but that's a pretty minor complaint in the grand scheme of things. If you want a game that really shows off the power of your brand spanking shiny new 4090 Ti or 5080 or whatever else is coming out, this is the game to play. Sure, your computer room's gonna feel like a sauna after any extended play sessions, but for these graphics, it's worth it. And number 9 is Cyberpunk 2077. Even though the base game is still a few years old now, the visuals really do hold up, especially when you use one of the many impressive community graphics mods came out. There is a whole lot to pick from in this category. Everyone and their mother has their own ideas about how to make an already good-looking game shine even more, but today I'm using the recently released Dreampunk 2.0 graphics pack. The goal here is to make the world look as crisp and clean as possible, fidelity-wise. Obviously, Cyberpunk isn't well kept in terms of its world. Some of it's pretty decayed and crappy, but whatever. It looks great.
My name is Arif Iqbal, and this is WNS News. We have a breaking development for today's international news segment, or should I say, interplanetary. In a daring orbital heist, millions of $dollars worth of goods were stolen from Galileo.
They have done a really good job with this one. Objects like cars look especially convincing, which is impressive because it's not like this mod is creating new models or anything, it's just a newish coat of paint over the base game. Like a lot of these mods, they rely heavily on camera effects like super heavy depth of field to give the world a more cinematic look. And if you're into these kinds of visuals, it's a really impressive representation of that. The mod also heavily relies on path tracing for the lighting, and DLSS to push the best picture quality on top of the reshades that come packed in with Dreampunk, and it all makes the world look a little more washed out, but also a lot more realistic. The thing that impresses me most about mods, honestly, is just how well the base game holds up. If the character models were bad, none of these changes would work at all. You'd see right through them, but if you take what's already there and add some new shaders and work around specific things, the game looks better than ever before. Even if it really is just a couple of new filters, who cares? At number 8 is Body Cam. You know the gimmick here. It's literally the name of the game. This multiplayer shooter is made to look like body cam footage. It's an increasingly popular trick to make games look more real, by kind of grunging up the camera effects to hide some of the deficiencies of the actual rendering. But you know what? It works. That's what matters. Some people might call it cheap, but I think they forget the reason why real life looks so real is because of all the imperfections rather than the perfections. Anyway, there's moments in body cam that look legitimately photorealistic sometimes. At least when you ignore the actual gun placement and all that. That doesn't line up with actual body cam footage at all, but that's gotta be, like, the way it is because you need to play the game. So it's understandable, and the game is exactly what it claims to be, a super realistic shooter with some environments that are so real looking at times it's actually a little jarring, especially when you see things that break the illusion. It's one of those things where it's so close to being almost perfect, and then you see something that isn't, and it really stands out. Even if, in the grand scheme of things, it's more likely to fool somebody into thinking it's real footage than almost anything else on this list. If you're not into fairly chaotic multiplayer shooters, there's probably not a lot in here for you, but as an immersive experience, it's really quite impressive. And number 7 is Star Wars Outlaws. This recently released Star Wars open world Ubisoft extravaganza really is a big step up for the studio. Their games have always looked pretty good, but between this and another game we'll talk about later, they've really entered the next generation with some pretty impressive visuals. On PC especially, this game is a real looker, and it runs surprisingly well on top of that.
Eric's contacts out on the step. Feel like going for a ride next?
There's a lot about the game that looks good. The little sidekick creature has an impressive range of animation and in expression, but the real star of the show is the environments. Every major location is so dense with detail, but then there's also these grand vistas that show off the world of Star Wars in a more grounded scale that you usually see. Most of the time in these games, there's little time to just stop and appreciate the environment, but this game gives you ample opportunities to just stop and smell the roses. Lean against the balcony, look out over a city, take a minute, play an arcade game, whatever. These guys understand one of the simple pleasures of playing an open world game, and that's just existing in the environment, especially when it's one as visually stunning as this. I can't say how good the game looks like on PS5, but on PC it's really impressive, and it has a pretty wide range of graphics options, and unlike almost every other game on this list, it's also not absurdly huge. It only takes up around 50 gigs of storage, which, believe me, is very welcome when you're playing a lot of these games. Like when you're writing a list or something. Just throwing that out there.
To be. Shoot!
I've done lots of jobs all over. Best one is on catch weed. That's where the money's at.
I wonder what the rest of the gang is up to.
And number 6 is Stellar Blade. The PlayStation 5 exclusive isn't on PC yet, but it's still really impressive what they managed to do on the hardware they were given. The game runs at a silky smooth 60 frames per second while also managing to look very impressive most of the time. The environments are mostly dilapidated ruins and deserts, but they still manage to make these normally boring areas look visually dynamic and interesting. A lot of that comes down to the art design, but the extremely detailed environments are very impressive, along with the many strange cyborg characters you encounter. Of course, the real star of the show is Eve. Clearly they gave her the most attention, but it's not like the only impressive character in the game. The more freakish characters you meet are in some ways even more impressive, both from a fidelity and art design standpoint. There are so many spots in this game that are just strikingly impressive, especially when you get to the space elevator and you get to multiple different views of the skyline as you ascend up into space. That's crazy. It's not a game that's pushing the most power. Like currently, again, it's stuck on the PS5, but it's nonetheless extremely impressive what they accomplished here. And number 5 is Nobody Wants to Die. This smallish, not small, but smallish, adventure game is noteworthy for basically being one thing, and it's graphically beautiful. It is one of the most striking visions of a dystopia I have ever seen in a game. It is fully rendered in absolutely stunning detail, and, I mean, look at it. You know what I'm talking about. It's not a question. The graphics are by far the most impressive thing about the game. It's otherwise a pretty straightforward walking simulator, but the presentation is so good it's honestly worth experiencing for that alone. The details of the city are really, really something else, and from the weird anachronisms like the old-timey hover cars to the pneumatic tubes to deliver mail, to the nightmare scenarios like the bathroom that's on an elevator that everyone in an apartment has to share. It's got a lot of clever ideas and unique visuals while also looking extremely good. If you want a real investigation game that challenges you, you might be a little disappointed, but as a graphics showcase, it's exceptional, and honestly, it's a pretty interesting story. So it's not like you're going to get bored while you're looking at the extremely pretty pictures. At least if you understand what you're getting going in.
Second, I have to move my car.
And number 4 is Still Wakes the Deep. Speaking of indies with amazing graphics, rather than creating a fantastical futuristic world, the goal of Still Wakes the Deep is the opposite. It's set in a 1970s oil rig off the coast of Scotland. The game oozes authenticity from the accents to the dialogue to the design of the rig itself, the decorations. It all feels exceptionally real. So when things take a turn for the horrible, it really stands out. The rig itself is relatively small, but it's so packed with life and detail, and what's even more impressive, at least for an indie game, are the character models and animations, which look quite lifelike at times. The strength of the game's art really starts to show when things get more surreal. Some of the ways the game depicts the human body getting twisted and deformed is some of the most disgusting stuff I've ever seen in a game, especially because of how realistic it all appears to be. I'm not sure I can show this stuff, it's so gross. I'm mostly here for the little details in this game, like dirt on the walls. There's something about it that just looks completely different. It's not the most intense horror game of all time, but it's got really good characters and some astounding graphics.
Jesus fucking Christ!
At number 3 is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It feels almost unnecessary to put a game like this on the list. I think we all just kind of accept that it looks good, but really what needs to be said is that Square Enix managed to accomplish something totally astounding with this game. Visually, it's on a whole other level. From the character models to the environments to the scale of the whole thing, it's an astonishing achievement. The way this game marries art design and graphics is really something else. It's got some of the most beautifully rendered environments in any game possibly ever. I mean, just look at any random spot in Calm or Junon, and take a second to really look at them. They're all so dense with detail it can be overwhelming. Rebirth doesn't manage to reach the fidelity of something like Black Myth Wukong on a maxed out computer. The PS5 doesn't have the juice for that. But what they managed to accomplish here is extremely, supremely impressive, and it'll be even more so when the game finally comes out on PC, whenever that happens.
Hey, check it out.
is insane.
Chocobo racing's nothing like that.
Well, you would know. It's all so much. Isn't it?
And number 2 is Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. Yeah, remember this? It came out December 2023 and immediately fell off the planet. But that's kind of what happens with Avatar stuff, isn't it? It's visually incredible, it's super impressive, people talk about it like it's the best thing in the world, and then nobody talks about it ever again. Avatar, the least culturally impactful massive franchise on the planet. But yeah, it is honestly one of the most visually impressive games to come out recently. Seriously, Massive, the people who made Star Wars Outlaws, has just been on a roll. Regardless of your feelings about either game, you can't deny that these are both visually incredibly ambitious games, and they pull it off. The game basically boils down to being a sci-fi Far Cry, but the graphics are next level. They're really trying to match what's so impressive about James Cameron's movies by creating lush, dense alien environments that are very different but feel so real to explore. As a Far Cry game, it's fun, it works, I like it. I don't care about what happens in it at all, but it's beautiful and it's a good game. You're not going to be fooled into thinking it's real life. It's pure fantasy, but it does look astounding most of the time. The lighting, the fidelity of every little plant and vine in the world just looks great.
I'd love to take out...
And finally, at number 1 is Senua's Saga Hellblade 2. Speaking of ignored, man, this one just came and went, huh? As a sequel, I don't think it lives up to the ideas and promise of the original game, but as a next-gen graphics showcase, it is impeccable. One of the toughest nuts to crack for video games has been, well, people. Developers can make worlds that are just about perfect. There's games that you can legit fool somebody into thinking it's real with the right screenshots, but when it comes to human faces, it's always looking just a little off. Hellblade 2 manages to do something remarkable, which is it almost manages to look real at times. It's not much, but once in a while, when we get one of these long, intense monologues from Senua, my brain struggles to tell if it's real, or if it's recorded footage, or if it's in-engine graphics, or what.
You think you have triumphed, but this means nothing. This woman was no god. She was weak, like you. This changes nothing.
It's only for less than a second, but it's better than pretty much any other game has ever managed to accomplish. And I don't think it looks real, but I do think it gets past that uncanny valley. Like, it feels alive, at least, rather than a rubber mask, and that's really impressive. It's because the motion capture and facial render tech is insane, but the environmental design can be remarkable as well. It's not up to the level of detail as something like Black Myth Wukong, which is more lush and fantastical, but the bleaky, rocky environments in Hellblade 2 can look astonishingly real at times. It's a real major step forward for graphic technology in games, especially when you're playing on PC. The gameplay, not quite as ambitious. It's mostly a retread of the first game, but the graphics are absolutely incredible, especially for a game coming from such a small studio, and I guess that's probably why it took so long.
We will end this.
You're f***ing dead.
You are making this easy for him. Be better. Yes. Hit him. You can see it. Feel it.